Okay. Okay, so continuing with this 1980 D150 project I've got going on. Right here, I've got a 1978 Dodge W200 with 400 in it. Runs. This truck has been off the road for 20 years, 21 years, whatever. I think last licensed in 2000. So been off the road for a while. I drove it around the yard. Obviously I got it running. Transmission is really questionable, which I'm sure is why I got parked. So and it's nice because somebody put a 4-barrel on it, so I've already got that intake. The carburetor, I'm pretty sure it's a quadrajet. It is a quadrajet actually, and I'm not going to keep that carburetor, but I've got the intake, so that helps. But it sounds weird what I'm going to do, but before I pull this engine out of this truck, I'm going to do an engine flush on it. I'm not going to change oil completely, but I'm going to flush it and then dump everything. That way it's just that much cleaner on the inside. And this is what I'm going to use. This KW, I get this at Napa, it's like $9 or something like that. And this stuff is fantastic. It will clean so much crap out of the inside of that engine. It'll be amazing. So I'm going to do this, let it run. I've got about 1.5 gallons in the temporary tank, which is right directly below the camera. And just so the inside of the engine is a little closer to ready to go when I get to it. And then here's a little trick, a neat little thing. This guy is what you find on usually 80s Diplomats, Grand Furies, that kind of stuff, because they had so much stuff on top of the motor. Getting to the valve cover to add oil was kind of a pain in the ass. So this, as you can see, just has your normal tabs like your your valve cover cap would have. It screws right in there, and then it sits almost exactly straight up in the air. Works big block, small block, slant six, all of it. So it just makes it so much easier to pour into a hole like this. And granted, this is a much larger hole. It doesn't fit like an old a bottle of oil does, but it still works pretty nice. So here is this guy. You can twist it. You can put it on the other direction, then it actually points sideways. Obviously you don't want to do that, but that's so handy. I need to get to the salvage yard and buy or pick up another couple of them just because. Now this stuff it almost smells like some sort of turpentine, kerosene kind of stuff, but it's just clear, and like I said, it'll wash the crap out of the inside of this engine like there's no tomorrow. And I should actually make sure there's enough in the radiator to not have this thing cook out for me. I thought I looked before. Oh yeah, radiator's full. Beautiful green antifreeze in there. Very nice. And I had checked oil before, my broken dipstick. Oh yeah, she's full now. Look at that, perfect. So I will throw the battery on here, the connection. And throw a little starting fluid in it because it always wants to fight a little bit. Shoot. Well, obviously you can see it runs. What I'm gonna obviously you can see it runs. So I'm just gonna set the high idle as fast as I can. And I'm gonna let this thing go through this gallon and a half of fuel, whatever it is, or about 10 minutes, which is what the directions say. 15 minutes or whatever. No, that's if you get it in your eyes. So that is all. So We'll show pictures of the inside of the engine later. Maybe even what kind of nasty looking oil comes out of here. So it ran for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then I don't know, something with the carburetor started coughing and wheezing really bad, and you know, it doesn't want to start again. So, but 4 or 5 minutes, that's better than it had before. I'm okay with that. And now we just start cutting up the rest of the truck so I can get at my engine. Oh yeah, and by the way, I could not find a high idle screw on this Quadrajet. I don't know what's up with that. So I just unhooked the return springs and just held it wherever it needed to be to get the RPM I want out of it. And it was a little trial by error. 4,000 RPM is a little bit high, so I had to tap that down pretty quick. But otherwise, for something I'm punting on, I'm doing pretty well. All right, I am thoroughly soaked, which I expected. Normally I do this in the end of the day, but today was beginning. So I'll change clothes in a little bit. So I'll kind of, there's still a lot of grease and gunk in there, but it's not inches thick like it was when I started. So, but, you know, clean enough to tear apart, inspect, and then take to the machine shop to get whatever machine work done I needed to do. So next I'm going to clean up the transfer case. As you can see, that's kind of what the engine looked like to begin with. It was pretty thick. So there we go, off to the next part. So discovering a couple little things about this engine as I'm tearing it down. This was my first clue that this was not an original engine to the truck. Not too often do you find a dipstick tube that's been pinched off as factory equipment on a pickup. So I did a little, cleaned the VIN pad off over on this side, and right there, I don't know if you'll be able to see the number, 7R248669. What that means is 7 means it came out of a 77, R means it was built in Windsor, Canada. So that pretty much narrows it down to Cordobas or Chargers. So, but it is a 400. And then I cleaned up this pad up here. Doesn't tell me anything terribly special other than it's got a cast crank, which of course I knew. And I don't know if you can really see that, if that'll show up or not. There's the Maltese cross there, which means the crank was, what was it, like 0.001 undersize. So basically they had to polish it again. And then this is the insulation that was underneath the intake. Typical, it kind of gets all nasty and gross after many, many years. They put that in there for a reason, to help knock down the sound. But this is the kind of stuff that it can lead to. That's a rust hole in my valley pan. There's another one there. It's really soft. More pinholes there. There's a couple pinholes back here I found too. So I've always debated whether I put those back in or not, because there are places that make reproduction ones. I don't think they hold the water like the old ones do, so they're a better thing. They help knock down the noise, which is what insulation is for. But there's always that potential. I might still put it in, I don't know. Because it's not going to live the neglected life that this once did. Because this was just, it was a truck, it was a It was a hard one. All right, so the block is completely tore apart. I don't know how this is going to show up on camera, but the cylinders don't look bad. They're not like gouged up. There's obviously, you can see there's some surface rust in there, but it's really smooth, and which I would expect, you know, from sitting as long as it did. They're all about the same. Some just a smidge better, some a smidge worse. There's a little bit of a ridge on the top right there. You know, not a whole lot, and I have no idea how many miles are actually on this engine. Now this is probably one of the worst cylinders. You kind of see that in there, and you can see a little deeper in there. So a lot of carbon buildup and gook like that inside this engine. The bottom of the oil pan is gross, we'll just say that. So had the timing chain had been replaced, and there was a ton of slop in it. It wasn't the nylon gear one. So, and there was a lot of RTV used to seal everything up. But that will change. When I put it back together, I'll do it right. And then we're here on the pistons. Oh, let's see here. I think it was one of the last ones. All right, now you can't really see that one. There's a couple of them that had little marks. Here we go. This one you can maybe see a little better. So maybe you can see a little better. Yeah, there it is. There's a couple of them had just these tiny little marks from valves, which is odd to me because this is a late 70s big block Mopar. Not exactly known for close tolerances when it comes to that part of it. So I got a good Mopar expert friend. I will ask him what he thinks of that. But it's possible if they were doing work on it and the valves were all the way open and they spun it over and it was just enough to touch. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because the valves themselves looked fine. But so yeah, one more step done in the marathon this project is going to turn into. Okay, it is November 4th, 2021. Got my engine back a couple days ago and the crank. So this is the first step. Punched it 30 over. It needed a little bit of boring. There's a couple cylinders that weren't going to clean up at standard, so I already had a set of 30 over pistons. So that's what we went with. November 14th, 2021. As you can see, I got quite a bit of it put together. I haven't even taken my heads in to get cleaned up and machined and whatever else. So this is as done as it's going to get done for a while. I have to recover from this build before I do the next part. But it's going together pretty well. Actually a little easier than the last one I did. Mostly because I probably learned a few lessons. But the big thing was the cam. The last one, the cam fought me going in. This one did not, although I did manage to screw up one cam bearing. So I've got almost a full set of extra cam bearings now. But that's my problem. So as you'll notice, and if you happen to notice, but pistons are in backwards. There's a little trick to that, or there's a reason for that, I should say, not necessarily a trick. I will provide a link. Hopefully I will provide the link to Uncle Tony's garage on what the advantage is there. It gives a little more power. And in a pickup, well, one of the big things was it's supposed to be a little bit quieter, just because those piston pin center point is offset a little bit. Not a heck of a lot. But it's supposed to be a little bit quieter. Well, in a pickup, who cares, you know? In a car, I could maybe understand that, but whatever. And there, it's punched 30 over. I have a cam in there that is almost exactly the same as what the Mopar Performance Truck RV cam was from back in the 80s, 90s, I guess, whenever they still had it. I think it was discontinued late 90s, early 2000s. So obviously that cam isn't around, but I found the specs for it, and that's what I put in there. So that's kind of where we sit right now. Interesting thing, taking apart the other engine. As you can see, I got a couple bolts missing right now. Here, let me set this down. So this is what there we go, now you can see it better. This is what the water pump bolt is supposed to look like. I had two of them in there like that. I mean, they wore off. And I think what happened, because the vehicle this engine came out of had aftermarket air conditioning on, so they changed the belt routing to make all that work. And I think what was going on, because I didn't notice which holes these came out of. I didn't notice they were worn until after the fact. So I think what happened is the belts were rubbing on those, because they're not ground, they're polished off. There's two of them like this. And I think that's it. So there's a little lesson. If you're going to change belt routings, pay attention to how close they are to other things. I've rerouted things and they've been close. I don't think they've ever been this close. So maybe I need to go back and look. Maybe there's enough bounce in the belt to do that kind of damage. So anyway, there it is. There it is. Oh, how beautiful a 400 is. So it's not completely done. I mean, there's a lot of little details that I have to put together yet. I have to take the manifolds off because there's some spark plug shields that have to go in there, and they go on before the manifold does. I got to take some head bolts out, but little things. I got to get more of those shields anyway. But for the most part, it's done, ready to go. Kind of all put together. It's a bunch of little things I got to deal with, but carburetor is just sitting there looking pretty because it's a thermal quad, and a thermal quad is a beautiful carburetor anyway. So that's kind of the end result of what you just watched. So I will mention a couple things. So I think you can all see me, hopefully. So these are your two your heater hose outlets, inlet off of the water pump assembly housing. This is just a regular straight one. You usually have to take this off to get this bolt all the way out correctly anyway. And even if you don't take this out, you need a thin wall wrench just to unscrew that bolt. But this guy, most people don't realize there is a screen in there. So no matter what you're doing, I would suggest to you to take this thing out whenever you're rebuilding an engine or throwing some used parts together. This one's relatively easy to get at, well, once the distributor's out of the way or the whole housing is off. Take it apart, clean that thing out, or make sure it's clean, and then throw her back in there, throw a little thread sealant on there, and throw them back in the hole. Just a little kindly bit of advice.